Hello, lovers, and welcome to Velvet Tales of Love and Longing, where love gets real and the stories hit deep. If you're a hopeless romantic searching for passion, heartbreak, and that undeniable chemistry that makes you believe in second chances, you found your spot. But before we dive in, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. It keeps the love alive and lets these stories reach more hearts. So, grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's dive into the twists and turns of love because every heartbeat tells a story. And tonight, it's one you won't forget. Interlocked, Part 1. Charisma and Lionel's story. What do you think it feels like to meet the one? Will it feel like destiny or a fiery connection? Will our souls recognize each other? Will there be a moment where we just click? This isn't about love or a trauma bond masquerading as a romance. This is about fate, destiny, kismet, a union designed at birth, but reserved for later in life. When the two have been seasoned, scarred, softened, ready. I don't believe in coincidences. Humans might move through life spontaneously, but I believe life is intentional. Each step is predetermined before we even choose to take it. Our Creator knew where our footsteps would land before we even started walking. So when life leads you to that person, the one whose rib you share, will our souls melt like we were always one and the same? Will it feel like coming home? Not to a place, but to a person. Not the instant burn of lust in your center, but the solid, consistent heat of familiarity. The kind that lives in your heart, in your spirit, in your knowing. Because I felt it. The moment we met, I knew, and I could tell. He knew it too. We met on a regular Saturday as I took my usual evening walk to relieve the stress of the week. I arrived earlier than usual, having finished my Saturday morning errands ahead of schedule. The lines were shorter than expected, and everyone moves with urgency. My mother didn't need me to pick up her medicine. She'd gotten it the day before, which freed up some more time to clean, shower, and get to the park just before 3. I usually arrived around 5. I saw a mother and son eating ice cream, walking casually as they talked about their week. A husband and wife arguing intensely as they jogged to the rhythm of resentment. A man listening to music as he walked his dog. But then there was him, standing in front of the water fountain with a tense look on his face. He looked distracted, like he came to complete a task he couldn't quite remember. There was something familiar about him, like I'd met him before. But I kept walking. I didn't want to distract him any further. I walked a full 2 miles that day instead of my usual 1.5. Extra energy from starting earlier, I suppose. On my way back, I bumped into him. "Oh, no, I'm so sorry," I said, hoping I hadn't broken any devices with my carelessness. But then I turned and we locked eyes, and we couldn't unsee the depths our souls had traveled to reach this moment, to meet, or maybe to meet again. "No, it's my fault. I've been off today," he said, sadly, but with a strange kind of gladness. "Is everything okay?" I asked, half concerned, half intrigued. "My mom is in the hospital, almost 300 miles away," he said, "and I've been trying to contact my brother for the last hour to check in, but my signal isn't working." "Yeah, depending on your carrier, this part of the park might cause you some trouble," I said, trying to offer some comfort. "You can use my phone. My service always works," I added, handing him my iPhone in its mocha-colored case. "Thank you," he said, half relieved, half confused by my kindness. "I'll be stretching over here. Bring it back when you're done," I told him. "It won't be long," he assured me. "Take your time. It's your mom," I said, walking to the side to continue stretching. He looked so familiar, but I couldn't place his face. So I kept stretching, waiting for him to finish the call. I noticed his face change. The intensity of anticipation turned into something else, a confused kind of grief. He held the phone close, and I saw a tear fall from his eye. My heart melted, but I minded my business. A couple minutes later, he walked over with the phone, but his hands felt heavier than before. Is everything okay? I asked, sensing the sadness in his grip. No, he said, staring into my eyes. Locked in familiarity but lost in his immediate pain, his eyes squinted, his head tilted. Have we met before? He asked. I don't think so, I replied. He opened his mouth to say something but stopped, put his hands on his hips, looked down. Then he said it. She passed. Although I didn't know him, I felt his grief in every breath. His muscular frame seemed frail, like he'd surely faint if given a shoulder to lean on. Did you drive here? I asked, worried for his safety. He stared into the distance, eyes moist, lips tensed, eyebrows furrowed. He wanted to cry, but didn't know how. Being in a park full of strangers when you learn your mother has passed will do that to you. Walk with me, I said. I've always had this fixation on saving people. If I met someone sad, I never walked away without trying to make sure they were okay. I can't tell you how many strangers I've hugged on the street, how many walks I've taken with lonely park dwellers who just needed an ear. It was a kind of souvenir from childhood, growing up as the scapegoat in a tense, abusive household. So this wasn't new, but it felt different. He stepped forward and followed my path back down the walking only lane. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, I said, assuring him that I wouldn't pry, that I just wanted to offer my presence, a kind face that cared out of human decency. We walked in the silence for a few minutes, letting the rhythm of our steps speak where words couldn't. Then, as we reached the edge of the path where I usually turned to head home, he stopped. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with unspoken emotion, for the phone and for walking with me. I smiled softly. Of course. And then, without warning, he stepped closer and wrapped his arms around me. A firm, warm hug that lingered. The kind you give someone you've known forever. The kind that says, I see you, even if I don't quite know why. I didn't pull away. I let him hold me. Because something in me said this wasn't just comfort, it was connection. When he finally let go, we looked at each other one last time. No names, no promises given. Just a moment suspended in something we couldn't quite name yet. And then we went our separate ways. Charisma story. Charisma! My mother yelled from the kitchen. I put my pen down and ran as fast as I could. I already knew what she wanted. I'm sorry, I forgot to start dinner. I apologized, grabbing pots, butter, and the ingredients with my 10-year-old hands. I had a lot of homework to do, I added, hoping it would appease her. Now I gotta wait a whole hour to eat, she muttered, agitated, digging in the fridge for a snack. I have some leftovers from lunch, I offered, trying to keep the peace knowing she would have to leave soon for her second job. I guess, she grumbled. Then, sharper, did your dad come by with the money? I started to sweat. That question always meant tension. I kept cooking, pretending not to hear her. I wish they'd leave me out of it, but I never got the privilege to stay out of grown folks' business. I was grown enough to clean and cook, grown enough to raise their kids, grown enough to handle the mess, but not grown enough to speak on the pain they dropped into my lap. My silence gave me away. She shifted her weight from one leg to the other, then slammed her hand on the counter. I flinched. She didn't even notice. Her focus was on the phone now, dialing with furious fingers. Her breath turned jagged. I knew it was coming. "Where's my damn money, Greg?" She barked into the phone, her deep, raspy voice cutting through the kitchen. "The next time I gotta call and remind you about child support, I'm beating your ass." I was shaking because I already knew I'd get it from both sides. "Charisma!" she shouted again, this time from her bedroom. I wiped my face and walked up the stairs slowly, taking a deep breath before pushing the door open. I didn't speak. I knew better. "Child support is due on the 3rd of every month," she said, belt in hand, her voice sharp and bitter. "If you don't bring it, you go to his door and pick it up. We gotta pay rent." She stepped closer so I could smell the rage in her breath. "You always let him get away with this shit," she snapped. Then the belt came down again and again. My face, my arms, my sides, until I was swollen. I dropped to the floor, numb. There was no use in crying or screaming. She didn't care. She used me as a punching bag, said I could take it since I was bigger than her. And if I cried or showed weakness, that just gave her more reason to start again. She yanked my face towards hers. "Next time you let him get away with this, it's gonna be worse," she hissed, then kicked me down the stairs. I scrambled to the kitchen to check the food. Then I collapsed, sobbed until my body shook. There wasn't much time for that. I had to sit in the tub, ice my face, and hide the swelling. I had school in the morning. School was the best part of my day. The library housed the books that became my escape from my abusive home. It didn't matter who wrote them or what they were about, as long as there was a man and a woman falling in love at sunset. I could melt into the pages and pretend I wasn't trapped in agony. The next day, my dad showed up with the money. He was waiting at the door when I arrived home from school with my 2 younger siblings. "I told you to tell her I couldn't pay this month," he said, handing me the wad of cash he obviously lied about not having. "How am I supposed to pay for 2 households? You know Lisa is having that baby next month. We gotta buy clothes, a crib, a car seat too." He continued on with his guilt trip. My position was clear. I had to make sure he gave the money, but I couldn't give my opinion on any of it. "You know we gotta pay rent, Dad," I said, firm and clear. "That's why I told you to get a job. Lisa said she'd let you sweep up here at the shop for some extra money." "Mom wants me to focus on school," I said. "You're not listening," he snapped. I knew it was coming. I got still. My siblings had already walked in the house and started removing their backpacks and coats. "I have to start lunch for the kids," I said, walking inside hoping it would stop him from going into a rage like she did. He grabbed my arm and slammed me against the door before I could get all the way in. "This is my last month paying, so you better figure something out," he said, squeezing my face. I looked at the ground and didn't respond. "Tell your mother my household comes first," he said, then walked away. That was the last we heard from him. I was so relieved when I left for college. I thought I'd finally be able to sleep in a little without worrying about anyone but myself. But it got worse. My siblings started running away from home, and I'd have to come back to help find them. I sent extra money from my financial aid and scholarships home to help her pay the bills. I went home on weekends to run errands instead of relaxing or catching up on my own chores. Then I started dating and realized I would always be loved this way. The initiator, the caretaker, the problem and the problem solver, the giver, never the receiver. Every man I dealt with treated me like a problem, like they were doing me a favor. They could smell the low self-esteem on me, taste it even. I was the one calling, I was the one planning the dates, the girlfriend without a boyfriend. The load was mine to carry alone. I had to stay firm and loyal while they dipped in and out as they pleased. After graduation, I took a vow of celibacy. I told myself I wouldn't date or have sex until I found the right one. So I focused on work, on my mom, my siblings. Then I met this amazing man who made me feel like a light instead of a heavy burden. I couldn't resist falling into the love I thought we had. We dated for 5 years, and it was great until it wasn't. Every now and then, he'd turn into someone else. He'd say things to crush me. Sometimes he even hit me. But the rest of the time, he was great. I didn't know if that was healthy, but I liked the version of him I saw on good days. So I suffered through the bad ones, hoping they'd stop. But they didn't. The bad days got closer together. The good days started to disappear. Eventually, I realized the good parts of him were an act. That evil, harsh being, that was the real him. But he had already moved into my home. It got messy. The cops had to remove him. I got a restraining order. He harassed me until he found his new victim. I mean, girlfriend. At 30, I gave up on love. Told myself I couldn't afford to let another jagged love chip away at my soul. The next chip might dissolve me completely, turn me into someone I didn't even recognize. So I turned inward. I went to counseling, took walks, worked intensely. I even started a blog about romance so I could write about it when I began to crave it. Love was the only thing that ever felt safe. Not the kind I saw around me, conditional, sharp, exhausted, but the kind I read about. I wanted the kind of love that didn't need fixing, just feeling. The kind that saw me, held me, chose me. Maybe that's why I gave so much. Because I thought if I loved hard enough, someone would finally stay. But before I could find that kind of love, I'd have to survive without it. Lionel's story. Why are you drawing fake stuff? That's not our house. My father snapped, snatching the paper out of my little hands before I could even explain. His voice wasn't loud, but it hit me like a belt. Dismissive, cold, tired. The paper was a crayon sketch of a house on a hill, sun shining, a family at a dinner table smiling, a mom, a dad, a son, all happy. I had just won a citywide art contest with it. They gave me a medal and everything. My teacher said art doesn't have to be real, I mumbled, holding the paper up again, just hoping he'd say something kind. He didn't. Just kept removing his suit jacket and loosening his tie, sorting through his briefcase like I wasn't even there. It's a family, I added, trying again. I made it because I thought. He cut me off, placing the paper on the counter like it was junk mail. Stop drawing fairy tales, he said, heading to his office. No, good job. No, I'm proud of you. Just the sound of the door closing. I stood there frozen. Then slowly, I crumpled to the floor. Silent tears soaking my shirt. Looks like the home you deserve, Aunt Tasha said softly, kneeling beside me. She picked up the paper, gently flattening the wrinkles before placing it on the fridge like it belonged in a gallery. He had a long day, baby. Try again tomorrow. Then kissed the top of my head. Your gift matters, even if he doesn't see it yet. She always saw me. The way I shut down when my dad walked in, the way I lit up when someone asked about my music. Tasha was warmth in a house built on rules and routines. She was the reason I made it to 13 without turning numb. The night that always replays in my head, my 13th birthday. I had just produced my first full track, a beat I was proud of. I saved up to buy a secondhand MIDI keyboard and spent hours learning software tutorials. I waited by the door that night with my headphones in hand. He walked in late, again, briefcase slung over his shoulder. shoulders slumped from work. I made something, I said, stepping in front of him, hope flickering in my chest. He paused, looked at me, then passed me. Tasha in the kitchen? He asked. Yeah. Make sure she ate, he muttered, then brushed past me. Didn't even take the headphones. Didn't even say happy birthday. That was the night something in me stopped reaching. Tasha found me later in my room holding the headphones like they were broken pieces of my heart. She didn't say much, just pulled me into her lap and hummed some gospel tune Grandma used to sing. I cried into her chest for the first time since I was a child. But life isn't fair, and God doesn't always give warnings. Tasha died in a car accident 2 years later, right before my 16th birthday. I didn't say goodbye, didn't go to the funeral. Couldn't. I just packed a bag and went to live with my mom. I didn't know what to expect. I barely remembered her. She left when I was 8. I thought she had abandoned me, but I was wrong. She welcomed me with open arms that didn't hesitate. She wasn't overly affectionate, but she was present. The type of woman who made hot breakfast and talked to the plant on the windowsill. She believed in old school parenting, and she wasn't always soft, but she saw me. And when I broke down over Tasha, she didn't tell me to stop crying or man up. She let me fall apart, then sat next to me in silence until the tears ran dry. That was the first time I understood what emotional safety felt like. We got close, slowly. She taught me how to cook real food, talked to me about life, her regrets, her dreams. She wasn't one for long hugs or emotional speeches, but she showed up. And for the first time, I saw what warmth looked like. She didn't know the version of me that had already learned how to stay quiet to survive. She didn't try to dig it out of me either. She just made room, sat beside me at the kitchen table and talked about her day until one day I started talking back. It was never a demand, never a game of prove you love me, just presence, just her showing up day after day. She was the first person I ever felt safe opening up to, and that became the blueprint. But it also created a gap, a quiet, confusing gap between me and every woman I tried to love after that. They wanted access to my emotions like it was owed. They wanted what they saw between me and my mom: intimacy, softness, safety. But they didn't understand how she got it. She earned it with patience, with stillness. She waited, but more importantly, she understood what she was waiting for. Most didn't. They mistook my calm for disinterest, thought they could pull love out of me with pressure, that if they gave more, I'd eventually pour back. But I don't pour under pressure. I retreat. Love, to me, was never loud. It was presence, consistency, patience. And every time someone asked me to rush, to prove, to open up on their terms, I felt myself shrink until eventually I disappeared inside the relationship entirely. By my mid-20s, I'd burned out. I gave sex when I wasn't ready, affection when I was numb, loyalty when I wasn't even loyal to myself. So I stopped. All of it. The pretending, the pushing. I took a vow of celibacy, not just from sex, but from the performance of intimacy. I needed to sit with the silence, to stop confusing being wanted with being understood, to stop confusing being needed with being safe. And in that stillness, I started to feel something I had never felt in my father's house: peace. Their story. Charisma's car hummed quietly beneath her, the rhythm of the road offering a strange kind of calm. On her way to the local coffee shop, she let her thoughts drift back to the man in the park, the one who just found out his mother passed. She didn't know his name, but his eyes, His energy stuck with her. So she said a quick prayer for him. She didn't know what it felt like to lose a mother. Not yet. But she respected the journey he was about to face. A life without a mother. That kind of grief had no blueprint. There were times she and her own mother had bumped heads, often triggered by Charisma's childhood trauma. Times when she'd wished in the heat of the moment that she didn't have a mother at all. That was the painful truth of growing up with a toxic parent, loving the parts of them that worked, and sometimes just loving them because, well, they were yours. Then you'd meet someone who had the kind of parent you dreamed of, and you'd feel guilty for your parent taking up space. Still, Charisma was thankful. Their relationship had improved. Once she recognized the toxic patterns that plagued her romantic life, she began to see the same dynamics within her family, especially her mother and siblings. Therapy gave her the space to rethink those relationships and reorganize her role in them, to be kind without self sacrifice, to give without going emotionally bankrupt. Her relationship with her mom wasn't perfect, but it was better now. Lionel stepped out of the nearby funeral home, his shoulders stiff, the cold air settling on him like another layer of grief. His hands were numb, but it wasn't from the wind. It was from everything. He crossed the street and ducked into a small coffee shop. Familiar, warm, quiet. The smell of espresso and cinnamon hit him like a memory from a calmer time. At the counter, Charisma stood in her caramel scrubs, nursing a chamomile tea between her palms. The bell above the door gave a soft chime, and instinctively she turned. Their eyes met. In that instant, something shifted. It wasn't just a spark, it was a quiet explosion, a current that ran beneath the skin and pulsed in the air around them, more intense than chemistry, deeper than mere attraction. It was the feeling of familiarity wrapped in something unexplainably sacred, like finding someone you'd lost before you ever knew them. The way you might lock eyes with a beloved relative in a room full of strangers. Immediate, grounding, and undeniably right. Neither of them moved at first. Their bodies stayed still, but something inside leaned forward. A magnetic pull hummed between them, invisible but insistent, like gravity made it personal. A silent recognition passed, thick with something tender and electric. And just like that, the world around them disappeared. Do I know you? They asked in unison, voices hushed with wonder. Then it clicked. The park! They said it in unison, then snickered. A surprised, quiet laugh that cut through Lionel's fog, like sunlight through clouds. You lost your signal, Charisma smiled. And you let me use your phone, Lionel smirked. Sure did, she replied, still smiling. The moment softened, their smiles fading into something more tender. How are you holding up? She asked, her eyes full of care. Lionel sighed, his expression shifting, tired but honest. Honestly, numb, he said. Just left the funeral home, trying to make sense of everything. They stood in silence for a few seconds that seemed to stretch on forever. Charisma searched his face, past the quiet exterior, into the tremble of his hands and the hollowness in his eyes. She didn't just see the man in front of her. She saw the little boy, grieving, confused, needing something, even if he didn't know what it was. So she stepped forward and hugged him, softly, carefully. She felt his hesitation, but she also felt when it faded, when his arms wrapped around her with urgency, like a man remembering how to breathe. She smelled like warm honey. Her hair brushed his ear. Something about her touch reminded him of his Auntie Tasha, comforting, safe, real. He melted. He didn't need to explain his pain. She didn't ask him to. She just offered him peace and presence. When she finally pulled away, her eyes lingered on his. Be gentle with yourself, she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Then, with one final smile, she turned and walked away. No number, no name, just something real left behind in the silence. He watched her go. The ache in his chest still throbbed. Grief wasn't going anywhere. But for the first time since the call to the hospital, he didn't feel alone. Later that evening, Lionel sat on the edge of his brother's worn leather couch, poking at a box of cold fried rice. The television played a basketball game that no one was really watching, the familiar commentary doing little to fill the silence that sat heavy between them. Dion glanced over, his beer bottle resting on his knee. You good? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Lionel shrugged. Yeah, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He paused, then added, I saw her again today. Dion raised a brow. Who? That sweetheart from the park. Dion sat up straighter. The same one you told me about last week? Lionel nodded, a soft, strange smile tugging at his mouth. Yeah, at the coffee shop across from the funeral home. She was just there, sitting in scrubs, sipping tea, like she was waiting for me or something. And? You talked to her? Yeah, we remembered each other at the same time. It was like this weird moment where everything slowed down. She asked how I was doing. I told her I just came from the funeral home. She didn't say much, just hugged me. He shook his head slowly, but not out of pity. It was different. Dion leaned back, stared at his brother for a beat before sighing. Ah, don't do this, man. Do what? This. Dion gestured toward him. You're trying to numb the pain of losing mom. Trying to give it meaning through some random girl who was nice to you during a rough moment? That ain't love, Lionel. That's grief playing tricks on you. Lionel looked down at the takeout container in his lap. His fork stilled. It didn't feel like that, he said quietly. I'm just saying, don't build castles out of clouds. She was being kind, and maybe that's all it was. You don't even know her name. I know. I know, Lionel muttered. She probably doesn't even think twice about it now. Dion continued. And here you are, holding on to it like it's fate. Lionel nodded slowly. Yeah, he said, though the words felt hollow in his mouth. Maybe Dion was right. Maybe he was just reaching for something, anything, to make the grief less suffocating. He could still feel the warmth of her hug, but now he wondered if he'd imagined how deep it felt. Maybe she really was just being kind. And maybe he was the only one who hadn't let go of that moment. He was starting to wonder if it was all in his head. The break room was unusually still for a Thursday evening. Someone had dimmed the lights, and the usual hum of gossip and exhaustion was softened, replaced with quiet murmurs and sympathetic nods. Charisma leaned against the counter, sipping lukewarm tea, only half listening to the conversation until she heard the name. Letty passed, a nurse said softly, folding her arms tightly across her chest. They said her son's handling the arrangements. Charisma blinked. The cup in her hand lowered slightly. Letty. She hadn't heard that name since the patient was transferred. Something about it pricked a soft place in her chest. Letty hadn't been in her care long, but some people didn't need time to leave a mark. Even in pain, she carried a quiet grace, something solid, something still. One evening during vitals, she gave Charisma a knowing look and said, almost out of nowhere, "You should meet my son." It caught Charisma off guard. She laughed it off at the time, but she never forgot it. And now she was gone. A basket was placed on the table near the fridge, filled with the blue pens, the kind Letty used to sign her paperwork. Someone had taped a note to the front that said, "Sign her guest book in blue." Letty always said black ink was for bills, not love. Charisma managed a small smile through the sting in her chest. She'd only known Letty through short shifts, through whispered prayers and post checks, but she had come to appreciate her presence. Some patients you move on from, some stay with you, long after you've left the room. "They're organizing a carpool to the funeral," another nurse mentioned. "Hospital van leaves at 10. Charisma nodded absently, not sure yet if she'd go. She hated funerals, but something about this one she didn't want to miss. Charisma sat at the edge of the couch near the door, but her thoughts were far away, lingering on the strangers she had met in the park and the coffee shop. The one with the sad eyes. It was as if every time they crossed paths, the world around them just paused. The chatter in the coffee shop seemed to quiet. The bustle of the park faded into the background. All that existed in those moments was the intensity of their gaze, the way they seemed to draw each other in without words. It was more than attraction. It was as though she felt him before she even saw him, like his spirit brushed gently against hers in passing. The sense of familiarity had only deepened since that first encounter. She shook her head, trying to clear the thoughts clouding her mind. Maybe it was just her trauma playing tricks on her heart finding meaning in moments where there was none. Maybe he was simply a man broken open by loss, and she was just the person in the right place, at the right time, offering a little kindness. Still, it lingered. That warmth, that pull. She didn't even know his name, but for some reason, she couldn't stop thinking about him. It was a cool Saturday afternoon when Charisma decided to take a jog through the park. The air was crisp, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows that stretched across the grass. She had been feeling restless all morning, and running was the one thing that always helped her clear her head. As her sneakers hit the pavement, the rhythmic sound of breathing in sync with her steps became a calming melody. Halfway around the loop, she spotted him. He was there again, the same man she'd crossed paths with twice now. His presence felt as familiar as the pull of gravity, like she'd been expecting to see him, even though she hadn't consciously thought of him since their brief, unexpected connection. She didn't know why she remembered his face so easily, but she did. He was jogging too, just ahead of her, his pace steady and sure. She took a deep breath, running a few more steps to close the distance between them. He must have sensed her approach, because when he glanced over his shoulder, their eyes met again, like the first time, as if they'd always known they would. A smile tugged at the corner of Charisma's mouth. This time, she wouldn't wait for him to break the silence. She slowed her pace just enough to jog alongside him. "Fancy running into you again," she said, her voice light but teasing. He chuckled, glancing at her for a moment before looking forward again. I was just thinking the same thing, he replied, his voice warm but tinged with something else, like he was trying to hide a piece of him behind his words. Charisma glanced sideways at him, trying to read him, but he kept his expression neutral. I didn't know you were a jogger. I'm not, really. Just trying to stay active, you know. It helps clear the mind. She nodded, understanding all too well. I get that. Running's one of the only things that helps me disconnect from everything. His eyes glanced over at her again, this time with a slight grin. His eyes lingering just a moment too long before looking ahead once more. You run like you've done it your whole life. Charisma laughed softly. I have, pretty much, since high school. Ah, that explains it. I was more of a basketball player back then. More of a jump and shoot type, huh? He smirked. Something like that. Not much of a runner either. That's why I'm out here now. She couldn't help but notice how easy it felt. This casual back and forth between them. No heaviness, no pressure. Just two strangers who, somehow, felt like more. So, what's your name? He asked, after a brief pause, as though he'd been debating whether to ask or not. Charisma's breath caught for a second, surprised by the question. He hadn't asked before. Charisma, she said, offering a smile. Charisma Turner. Nice to finally meet you, he said, grinning. I'm Lionel Harris. They both nodded as if the exchange itself held more weight than just their names. Lionel, that's a unique name, Charisma said thoughtfully, then added, is there a story behind it? He gave a small shrug, looking down at his feet for a second before meeting her eyes again. Not really. Just something my mom liked. Never asked for an explanation. The casualness of his response seemed to hold some unspoken depth, but Charisma didn't press. They kept jogging in comfortable silence for a few moments before she spoke again. You've lived in town long? She asked, breaking the quiet. Yeah, a couple years now, he replied, eyes focused ahead. I'm from a little further south, though. Moved up for work. What about you? Born and raised here, Charisma said, feeling a pang of pride she hadn't realized was there. Couldn't imagine living anywhere else. Lionel nodded thoughtfully, slowing his pace just slightly. I get that. There's something about small towns. The way everything feels like it has its place, you know? She smiled, the conversation easing into something more familiar. Definitely. It's like no matter how big or small, everyone here knows your business, but in a way that makes you feel like a part of something. He chuckled softly. Yeah, sounds about right. Can't walk down the street without bumping into somebody. They ran in sync, the steady rhythm of their steps matching, the conversation flowing effortlessly, yet neither of them seemed to be in a hurry to end it. Charisma felt lighter now than she had earlier that day. There was something about Lionel's presence that settled her, something familiar and grounding that she couldn't quite explain. When they reached the end of the loop, she slowed to a stop and wiped her brow, her heart still racing from the jog, but also from the conversation. Lionel did the same, pausing beside her. For a long moment, they simply stood there, catching their breath, the hum of the park around them. Well, she said, her voice a little breathless, I'd say I'm starting to get to know you a bit better. Lionel smiled, the edges of his eyes crinkling. Yeah, same here. It's good to talk. She nodded. It is. We should do this again sometime. He hesitated, his eyes searching hers for a moment. I like that. As she turned to leave, Charisma felt a warmth bloom in her chest, subtle but undeniable. There was something about Lionel that lingered, something that tugged at the edge of her soul like a whisper from the universe. She couldn't name it, couldn't reason with it, but deep down, a strange certainty had begun to settle in her bones. This wasn't coincidence. It felt orchestrated, like something beyond them had gently, deliberately woven their paths together. And though she couldn't explain it, she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, something greater wanted them to find each other. Before stepping into the funeral home, Lionel paused just outside the door. The weight of grief pressed down on him, heavier than it ever had. His mother's passing, so sudden and final, had left him in a fog he couldn't seem to shake. He hadn't truly let himself mourn, not out loud. But now, surrounded by those who loved her, or simply came to say goodbye, he feared the emotions would crash down without warning. With a slow, shaky breath, he pressed a hand to the door, steadying himself for what waited on the other side. Inside, Charisma walked with quiet reverence. She had attended more funerals than she could count, but this one sat heavy in her chest. Letty hadn't just been another patient. She had felt like home, like comfort. There was a strange charge in the air, an inexplicable tension that tugged at her spirit. Her mind wandered to the man from the park, the way his presence had stirred something deep and familiar inside her. She had felt it even before seeing him. Maybe it was just the echo of old trauma, or maybe it was something real. She moved further into the room, and then, like a whisper from fate, her eyes found him. Lionel. The same man. The one from the park. The one who'd linger in her thoughts longer than she cared to admit. He stood at the entrance, stiff in posture, a man trying not to break. And yet, the moment their eyes met, something shifted. Quiet and powerful, like time folding in on itself. The pull between them was undeniable, deeper than familiarity, beyond attraction. Their souls recognized each other before their minds could catch up. This wasn't a coincidence. This was something else. Hey, you. They both said at once. Soft, surprised, and somehow certain. The words clung to the silence between them like a secret, echoing louder than anything else in the room. Before either could say more, a voice called Charisma's name. Her coworker, gentle but firm, reality tugging her back. Lionel watched her turn, watched the moment slip. But just as she began to walk away, she looked over her shoulder. Their eyes locked one more time, and this time it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. If you felt every heartbeat, every tear, and every kiss tonight, don't leave without showing us some love. Like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who believes in love's messy, beautiful journey. There's more passion, more heartbreak, and more unforgettable tales coming your way right here on Velvet Tales of Love and Longing. Until next time, keep loving, keep longing, and remember, every heartbeat has a story. Good night, lovers.